It was a very dreary day on the island of Sodor. Fog was heavy around the island, and the sky was thick with clouds blocking out the sunlight. The engines were warned to lower their headlights and run slowly as the fog made it hard to see ahead. On that same morning, James was tasked to take a passenger train to Ellsworth. No big deal. It was just taking some shiny, beautiful coaches down the line. No biggie. Well, it shouldn't be, but the fog just made things so unnerving. He couldn't put his buffers on it, but something felt wrong about today. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. All those silly stories of Edward make me think of ghosts. Those sound real. I hope. When he arrived at the station, James's crew uncovered him from his coaches and then ran him around to the water tower. He was running around with water, so he needed a drink. His crew, however, found it a bit difficult to get to the water tower. The ground felt like it was sinking beneath them. It was very strange. James, for his part, didn't notice anything odd. He was just taking a drink and having a well-deserved rest for a splendid red ending. But then... James shut his eyes tightly as he felt himself fall through the rails and into the ballast. But it felt like he had landed back on the tracks. James was confused. He tried to open his eyes, but a wave of bright light immediately flooded his view, and he shut them again. James slowly opened his eyes. I smoke pot. What the? What is this place? James looked around. He was still on the rails, but they were no longer on ballast. They now seemed to be laying on a carpet. He looked around. He was no longer in the yard, that was for sure, for the yard was not completely boarded off by yellow walls. He looked up to see if he could see his crew, or at least the sky, but all that he saw was a bright yellow light shining upon him. James now looked ahead. It seemed like the rails led somewhere. He wasn't sure where, but they led somewhere. Without much choice, he began to move forward. James found that he had to go very cautiously along these rails. They were laid very poorly, and making the bends was difficult. Note. Whoever laid these rails did a very poor job, I can tell you that much. As James made his way, however, he began to feel more perplexed than anything. He kept seeing workmen huts near the track, but they were empty, devoid of any life. He saw boxes close to the track. He saw signal towers, but there was no signal box nearby. Soon, he began to see sightings that seemed to connect to nowhere. He saw trucks. He saw tenders. They seemed to be merging into the ground. What on Sodor? Soon, James found a dead end. Oh, You must be joking. James sneered at the side of the wall in front of him. He had done all this way for nothing, and the sound of the buzzing light was starting to kill him. He had started to think of going back. Presently, however, he noticed something off about this dead end. James now looked closer. To him, it seemed like the buffers weren't correctly attached to the rails, and this wall seemed fake. Not having any other options at the moment, James started to roll back. Here goes nothing, I suppose. James popped out the other side of the wall. To his annoyance, it seemed that this place seemed to go on for much farther, and so continued to move on. James kept puffing for what felt like hours, and every time he tried to look around to see if he made any progress, he always saw the same walls and the same carpet. It felt like he was going in circles. And he honestly felt like somebody was watching him, but he couldn't tell who or where they were. This is too creepy for my liking. And worst of all, the lights. Those damn bright lights overhead just kept buzzing. Buzzing and buzzing. Then James began to hear something flickering. It wasn't his lamp, it was still shining brightly. Then his whole surrounding just went dark. Oh, what now? Thankfully, James's lamp was still on, so he could still see the track ahead of him, but his surroundings were just complete darkness. He couldn't tell where he was at, or he couldn't tell if he was close to something or not. Though, if he was being honest, he didn't know where he was going half the time. Still, James decided it was best to keep going. There was no use staying around here. So, James continued ahead, with his lamp shining brightly and showing him the rails ahead. Though, as he kept moving, he saw some pretty unnerving things. James went deeper and deeper into these rooms, and the further he went, the more he began to think that there wasn't an exit, not one he could find anyways. Furthermore, he began to feel hopeless. Every time he'd think he'd found a way out, he would just come back to the same spot again. He was beginning to recognize it, and that feeling, that awful feeling of dread in the pit of his smoke box, was beginning to grow larger. He felt like he was losing his mind, seeing the same walls all the damn time. Eventually, James rolled over a set of points. They were broken anyways, so he just went ahead. Further and further down the single track he went, until eventually he began to hear something. Oi! Who's there? James couldn't properly look behind him, but he could feel that somebody else was running down the track with him. And they seemed to be coming really fast. Soon, the sound of another engine puffing quickly became louder and louder and louder. James was now starting to panic. Who was behind him? Why were they going so fast? Panicking, James began to pick up speed himself. Who are you? Why are you chasing me? But to James's horror, the other resident didn't slow down. He kept going faster and faster, breathing down his neck. It was almost like they didn't hear him. James went faster and faster, trying to lose his other ending. Soon, James rushed around the bend, and to his horror, he saw the end of the line. Yikes! James braked hard, but he was still going way too fast. There was no way of avoiding it. With a collision inevitable, James shut his eyes and prayed for a miracle. James waited and waited, but there was no feeling of a collision. He waited a second more, and he thought he was hearing birds again. More scared than confused, James slowly cracked open his eyes. He noticed that he was back outside. James blinked once, twice, and a third time just to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. He was out. He was back. He was very relieved indeed. James didn't know how long it took until another resident found him. When they did, he asked him where he went. But James never gave a definitive answer. He thought it was better for what happened in those rooms to stay in those rooms. So, I must advise you to please watch your step, for a wrong road can lead back into these rooms, where you may never perhaps find an exit. All you will have for company are the mono-yellow walls, the moist, stinky carpet, and the endless burst of the lights. And perhaps, may God would save you if you hear something wandering nearby, because I can assure you that it has certainly heard you.